Welcome to Contradicting the Cosmos, the show where I refute the YouTube atheist, the Cosmic Skeptic. In today's episode, Mr. Cosmic is doing his own refutation of the argument from improbability, which Rationality Rules attempted and I refuted him, but the Cosmic Skeptic is clearly better than Rationality Rules at this, as we shall find out. Let's begin.
Interesting. This guy claims that he can prove God with nothing more than the roll of a dice. Let's check it out.
Some people say that human existence is a result of a roll of the cosmic dice.
Okay, 5 seconds in and we already have an immediate straw man. It's often said of atheists that they believe that the universe and the life within it is all some kind of freak accident. But as we'll go on to see, yes, many atheists do believe that the universe has laws and principles which govern its evolution, only that these laws came about through natural processes.
Like the gambler who stakes his life savings on the next throw, we just got lucky in the lottery of life. Some people say there's no purpose in the universe, no grand plan, no God behind it all. Our numbers just came up and here we are.
I'm worried that you're getting a bit mixed up here. You said no purpose in the universe, but I think you're committing a kind of reverse fallacy of composition, which by the way is a fallacy that I'm going to go into when I do my Kalam cosmological argument video. But basically, I suppose think of it this way. It may be that there's no purpose of the universe. There's no purpose of the universe as a whole. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there can't be purpose existing within it. But also, it's worth considering that, to paraphrase Richard Dawkins, the universe doesn't owe you a sense of purpose. It may be the case that there is no purpose to the universe, but unfortunately that doesn't mean that there has to be a God. You see, purpose and meaning isn't a necessary constitute of the universe.
First off, the fallacy he's looking for is the fallacy of division. That is arguing that what is true of the whole must also be true of the parts. But he did not commit this fallacy, because whether they like to admit it or not, the atheistic worldview does not allow for purpose. Of course, this depends specifically on which kind of atheist you are, but generally, they would be materialistic and naturalistic, which, when you think through that kind of worldview, you would have to come to the conclusion that there is no such thing as free will. And if there's no free will, you could not even assign purpose to yourself. Which means, if atheism is true, there is no purpose, either for the universe or in the universe. And it is not a straw man to say some people believe that. He didn't even say some atheists believe that, he just said some people. But, at the end of the clip, yes, purpose is not evidence for design. Design is evidence for purpose. But the guy was not arguing about purpose, merely stating some people's positions, which his argument is supposed to refute.
But I don't believe them, and nor should you. If I roll this dice, the chances of getting a 6 is 1 in 6. That's not too bad. But what are the chances of me rolling 6 twice in a row? Well, the odds get longer. It's 1 in 6 times by 1 in 6. That's 1 in 36. So I'd have to be pretty lucky to get 2 6s in a row. Now, every time I add the chances of rolling another 6 in a row, the odds go up exponentially, and it gets even more unlikely.
I'd be careful with the way that you're wording this. I think you might be committing another fallacy, the gambler's fallacy, or the fallacy of the maturity of chances. You seem to be implying that if you rolled 4 6s in a row, then the chances of rolling another 6 on your next turn would go down. But the chances will always be 1 in 6. No matter what you've rolled before, each roll is independent, therefore the chances stay the same.
There's not much to say here. He's not making that argument. As you can see yourself in the video, he never makes the argument that the odds of rolling another 6 is increased. He always sticks with the odds of the whole group of 6s as a whole. I think Mr. Cosmic just really wanted to use the gambler's fallacy in his video.
Now, what if I rolled this dice 70 times and every single time I got a 6? Okay, that's pretty unlikely, but it's possible, right? Well, in fact, the chances of rolling a 6 70 times in a row are around 1 in 10 to the 55. That's a 1 with 55 zeros after it. Now, just to put that in perspective, how long would I have to stand here rolling this dice, allowing about 5 seconds per roll, before hitting that lucky streak and rolling 76s in a row? Well, I had a mathematician friend work it out for me. On average, you would have to continually roll this dice for 100 trillion, 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 trillion years before your numbers come up. That's a long time.
Now this is an accurate probability, but to anybody who thinks that this contradicts what I just said, the only reason that this probability can be applied to the entire sequence of rolling 70 dice is because we'd already decided that we wanted to roll 76s in a row. After having rolled 76s in a row, the chances of rolling another 6 would still be 1 in 6.
What if you applied that thinking to us? What are the odds of us being here? Now, the odds of rolling 76s in a row, 1 in 10 to the 55, as it happens, those are the same odds of something called the expansion rate of the universe being just right for the existence of us here today.
I'm afraid that's not quite right. You're using the right number, but you're not using it in the right way. There wasn't necessarily a 1 in 10 to the 55 chance that the expansion rate of the universe would have been what it was. Rather, you should think of it as if the expansion rate of the universe had been different by a factor of 1 in 10 to the 55, then the universe as we know it couldn't exist. Now, it might seem like this is just trivial and I'm just being pedantic, but it's an important difference, and the reason is that the case that you're presenting in the form that you're presenting it implies that there was an equal chance of different expansion rates occurring. You're saying that a slow expansion rate had the same chance as a fast expansion rate had the same chance as the expansion rate which we actually see today. But by presenting the facts correctly and simply stating that if the universe's expansion rate had been different by a factor of 1 in 10 to the 55, then the universe couldn't exist, you're not implying that different expansion rates had the same probability. It may be that the universe had to have the expansion rate that it has today. But even the fact that the universe is expanding at all is a bit of a mystery. Of course, we know it must have gotten started at the Big Bang, but the expansion rate of the universe is actually accelerating, and nobody knows why. A lot of scientists have put it down to this mysterious energy that they call dark energy, but nobody really knows what that is either. And so there's so much mystery surrounding the expansion of the universe. To make a claim that you know that the probability would have been the same for different rates of the expansion rate of the universe is nonsense. I mean, who knows? Perhaps dark energy is some kind of regulator which governs the speed of the universe's expansion. Perhaps due to some undiscovered law, the universe has to be expanding at the rate which is expanding. I don't know. But you don't know either.
And here, I believe, is the crux of his argument, and why I consider him better than rationality rules on this one. Yes, the 1 in 10 to the 55th power number is not the probability. It is the fudge factor. Great evidence for design, but questionable evidence for probability. It does indeed require the assumption that there was an equal chance for any other number. And I was almost ready to agree with the Cosmic Skeptic on this, in that I don't know exactly how they turn a fudge factor into a probability, but then he went and made an appeal to ignorance. He tries to say that maybe there's an undiscovered law that regulates that sort of thing. But until he gets back to the first cause, we will have to ask, and what causes that law to be the way it is? For example, the law of gravity. Why is gravity the way gravity is? Why isn't it double or half as much as it is now? What law of nature are you going to cite that would explain why gravity is the way it is? And if it is a law of nature that you used, then I will ask the same question about that law of nature. Until you can come up with a first cause, then in your worldview, every possibility is possible, equally. Until I started doing the refutation for this clip, I was seriously ready to tell everyone to stop using the probability arguments and just focus on design. But no, probability is right. There could still be an argument here against probability because, like I said earlier, I do not know how you turn a fudge factor into a probability. I don't know if the numbers would actually be the same, but in an atheistic worldview, the chances for any outcome are the same, unless you can provide some reason that the chances would be different for different circumstances.
From the moment of the Big Bang, when our universe began to rapidly expand, the rate of that expansion was exquisitely finely balanced. Any faster, and the universe would have expanded too rapidly to allow the formation of chemicals, atoms, stars, and galaxies. Any slower, and the universe would have collapsed back in on itself. But as it happens, the universe expanded at just the right rate to allow for life to develop in the future, for us to be here.
I think you've hit on quite an important point here. It is astonishing that the properties of the universe are so finely tuned to allow for life to then go and observe how finely tuned that universe is. But of course, if the universe was tuned in any other way, then that life wouldn't have been able to evolve to then observe the universe. And so, of course, the properties of the universe had to be as they are to allow for life to go on to observe that the properties of the universe are as they are. But also, as stated before, your dice analogy is grounded in faulty logic. Your number describes a margin of leniency, not a probability.
And here's some examples that you've probably heard before, but maybe you didn't know they were fallacies. Why is the universe ideally suited for life? Because otherwise we wouldn't be here to observe it. Duh, the anthropic principle, right? Well, that is true, isn't it? It is true that if the universe were not ideally suited for life, we wouldn't be here to observe it. But that really doesn't explain why it's ideally suited for life, and so it doesn't answer the question. It'd be kind of like if I were the sole survivor of a plane crash, and a reporter came to me and said, Dr. Lyle, why did you survive that crash? I said, well, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be here to answer your question, right? That doesn't answer the question, does it? Why did I survive it? I don't know, but in any case, that's not an answer. Why is the universe ideally suited for life? Because God created it that way, because as a creator. And the fact that we wouldn't be here to observe it otherwise is irrelevant. It's true, but it's irrelevant. Why do living creatures have complex parts that function together so perfectly? Because if they didn't, they would have died off. It is true that if they didn't, they would have died off, but that doesn't explain why they have them in the first place, does it? You know, natural selection does not explain why we find animals that are suited to their environment. It only explains why we do not find animals that are not suited to their environment. Think about that, it's different. Why do we find animals that are suited to their environment? Because God created animals with certain abilities so that they would be well suited to their environment. Yeah, those that aren't die off, that's true. But this isn't an answer to the question. All fallacies of irrelevant thesis can be answered with this simple response. True perhaps, but irrelevant.
And the expansion rate of the universe is just one among 30 or so other incredibly sensitively finely tuned constants and fundamental forces in the universe that must be just the way they are for the universe to be able to produce us.
Which does seem to beg the question as to why a god would create a universe with such knife-edge properties.
So let's imagine, if I went ahead and rolled this dice 70 times, and what do you know, every time it came up 6. No waiting for trillions upon trillions of years. First time. Beginner's luck? Hardly. You would assume that I must have rigged it. Maybe the dice are loaded. Maybe there are 6s on every side. It can't be chance.
Okay, I'm going to try to briefly explain why this analogy just doesn't work once and for all. Yes, rolling 76s in a row does have a probability of 1 in 10 to the power of 55. But here's the catch. So does any other sequence of numbers over 70 rolls of a dice. Now if you don't believe me, just bear with me. Imagine that we took a piece of paper. Now on that piece of paper we'll write down 70 random digits in a row, each digit being between 1 and 6. Now let's take a dice and roll it 70 times. What is the probability that that dice will come up with the numbers that we wrote down on the piece of paper in the order that we wrote them down? The probability would be 1 in 10 to the 55. Exactly the same as if we predicted rolling 76s in a row and then rolled 76s. The reason for this is because of a principle of probability which I mentioned earlier, that every single roll of the dice is independent of the other. That is, every single stem of the probability tree is independent of what came before it. To explain this further, allow me to simplify. Let's say that instead of wanting to roll the dice 70 times, we only want to roll it 4 times. Okay, now let's say that we want to roll 4 6s in a row. The probability of rolling 1 6 on the first roll would be 1 in 6. The probability of rolling a 6 on the next roll would be again 1 in 6, and so on. And the way that we work out what the probability would be of rolling that exact sequence is by timesing them together. So 1 in 6 times 1 in 6 times 1 in 6 times 1 in 6, which equals 1 in 1296. Pretty unlikely. But now let's take a completely different sequence. So let's take the sequence of, say, 2, 3, 1, 4. What would be the probability of rolling this sequence? Well, the probability of rolling a 2 is 1 in 6, followed by the probability of rolling a 3, which is 1 in 6, and so on. And if we times them together, we also get 1 in 1296, the exact same probability of rolling 4 sixes in a row. In other words, rolling a double 6 is just as likely as rolling any other 2 digits, say a 1 and a 3. The only reason that one is any more extraordinary than the other is that we're presupposing an outcome. I would be just as impressed with somebody who could predict, say, 1, 4, 6, 2 and then successfully roll that, as I would with somebody who could successfully predict 4 sixes and then roll that. Reason being, the probability is precisely the same. In the same respect, it might seem extraordinary that we live in a universe which is governed by principles which precisely allow for its existence and the existence of life within it. But it's only extraordinary if we assume two things. Firstly, that these principles had an equal chance of having any value, and secondly, that there's some kind of end goal in mind, both of which can only be proved through circular reasoning.
First of all, I would be more impressed with somebody who could predict rolling 2, 3, 4, 5 than somebody who predicts 6, 6, 6, 6. Because you can practice to get good at rolling a single digit over and over again, but it is a lot harder to do that with different numbers. But yes, the probability is the same. So what? You see, these odds don't help your case, because in this analogy, rolling all sixes 70 times is the only way you have life in the universe. Taking it down to 1 dice for simplicity's sake, in order to roll a 6, you have a 1 in 6 chance. That means in order to roll any other number besides 6, you have a 5 in 6 chance. Do you see the problem with your worldview? Do you see the problem with your argument? You are trying to claim that the odds are all the same in order to claim that you're not actually beating the odds. But you very much are.
But also, which god are you trying to prove? Even if this video was convincing, the only thing that it could feasibly prove is some kind of independent first mover. We couldn't possibly know if this first mover cares about us specifically, or even if it cares about the universe at all. We have no way of knowing if the universe wanted or needed to end up this way. We just have to accept that it did. Let's not presuppose that there's any kind of goal or ultimate plan to the universe. Why would we want to abide by some kind of cosmic plan when we could create our own? But
that is not the argument. Do not be like rationality rules and make the mountains out of molehills fallacy. The argument is not about which god. That is a different discussion. And you cannot create your own cosmic plan. You may have some say in your own destiny, but you have no say in what the universe does.